Are you ready to discover how Star Trek shaped the future of technology? These are the 5 Star Trek technologies that made real-world scientific breakthroughs and became reality. Let's dive in and find out. Number 5. Removable storage. Imagine a world where you could carry all your important stuff in a tiny gadget that fits right in your pocket. That's what removable storage is all about. Let's take a trip back to the past when magnetic tape was the big thing. Back in the 1930s, people used it to record audio on big reels. Then in the 1950s, they figured out they could also store video on it. Cool, right? But it was huge and only for fancy industry folks. Then along came Star Trek, and they were like, hey, what if we make this magnetic tape thingy smaller and use it to store data? And bam, the idea of floppy disks and USB drives was born. It was a big deal in 1966 because no one had seen anything like it before. But here's the kicker. The first floppy disk drive didn't show up until 1967, and it took until 1971 for it to hit the shelves. Can you believe it? And get this, those early disks could only hold about 1.44 megabytes of stuff. That's like one tiny fraction of a song nowadays. But hey, back then it was revolutionary. Now we've got USB drives that can hold thousands of songs, pictures, and documents. It's like carrying a whole library in your pocket. So the next time you plug in your USB drive, remember, it's not just a piece of plastic, it's a piece of history, making life a whole lot easier for all of us. Number 4. Tablets. Those handy little devices we use for everything from reading books to browsing the internet actually had their beginnings way back in 1965. Yeah, that's before Star Trek even hit our TV screens. But hold on, Star Trek might not have invented tablets, but they sure did predict them pretty accurately. In the Star Trek universe, they called their tablets Personal Access Display Devices, or just PADs for short. Now, they never called them tablets like we do today, opting for fancy names like data slates, or even just plain old paper. Can you imagine calling your iPad a data slate? It doesn't quite have the same ring to it. The cool thing is, these futuristic pads in Star Trek were basically the same size as our tablets, and could do a lot of the same stuff, like connecting to the ship's computer. Just like how we connect our tablets to other devices using Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. But here's where Star Trek got it a bit wrong. They thought tablets wouldn't be a thing until way into the 22nd century. Turns out we're using them way sooner, and they're way better than what they imagined. While they treated their pads like stacks of paper for different tasks, our tablets are like mini computers, capable of doing a whole bunch of stuff all at once. Back then, storage was a big deal, and they didn't have anything close to our modern technology. So we can forgive them for thinking that a tablet holding just one book might be impressive. Imagine if that's all your iPad could do. So while Star Trek might not have nailed every detail about tablets, they sure did a good job of imagining a future where we'd all be carrying around sleek, powerful devices in the palm of our hands. Number 3. Mobile games. In Star Trek The Next Generation, there's an episode called The Game, where Riker, a crew member, brings back a really fun but dangerously addictive game from his vacation. This game isn't like any ordinary game. It's super cool because it mixes reality with a digital world. But it's also super bad because it makes people really want to keep playing it all the time. Riker gets everyone on the Starship Enterprise hooked on this game, even though it's causing big problems. But then, here comes Wesley Crusher, who's not everyone's favorite, but he saves the day with the help of his new friend, Ashley Judd. They figure out that the game is tricking people's brains into feeling really good whenever they play, and that's why it's so addictive. Now, this might sound like just a silly TV show, but it's actually kind of like what's happening today with mobile games. You know those games you play on your phone? They're designed to make you want to keep playing by giving you little rewards that make your brain feel happy. Like when you complete a level or get a high score. And just like in the Star Trek episode, people end up telling their friends about these games, and they get hooked too. The companies that make these games are really smart because they know that if they make the games addictive, people will keep playing and they'll make lots of money from things you can buy in the game. So even though Star Trek was just a TV show, it kind of predicted how addictive games could be in real life. But instead of working towards a future where people focus on enjoying life without being glued to screens all the time, we've ended up with games that sometimes feel like they control us more than we control them, and that's not so great. Number 2. Video calls. The very first video call happened in 1964 at the World's Fair, which was 2 years before the TV show Star Trek came out. But it wasn't until 1970 that regular people could use it, and even then it wasn't easy to get. Not many folks knew what to do with it. Even though the idea of video calls had been around, it was Star Trek that made it seem useful. In the show, the captain would often ask for a communication to be shown on a screen. We'd watch as characters chatted by looking at their screens. Without knowing it, they figured out something important that took a long time for others to get right. See, the problem with video calls was that nobody knew how to make them work. Even the folks selling them didn't have a clue. How could you get someone to stare at a screen on a phone stuck to their wall, or sitting on their bedside table while they talked? The answer? You couldn't. Star Trek realized that the key wasn't putting a screen on a phone. Instead, it was about making the phone part of the screen that people were already looking at. In other words, they made the communication screen the same one people were already watching, so it felt natural to look at it. So, while the first video call technically happened before Star Trek, the show made the idea of video calls seem sensible and practical. It showed that instead of trying to force people to look at a separate screen on a phone, it's better to integrate the screen into something they're already using. And that's a lesson that took a while for technology companies to catch on to. Number 1. Virtual assistants. Guess what? Typing has always been a bit annoying. Even back when Star Trek was on TV, they talked about using touchscreens a lot. But still, you had to use your hands, which could be used for better things. Why waste time typing when you could just talk to the computer? Voice recognition was something they talked about in Star Trek 2. But back then, it was just a cool idea, not something real. Now, though, we use it all the time. Well, sometimes it's a pain. I'm always yelling at Siri, and it's not like she always gets it right. But at least she can turn off my lights. In Star Trek, the computers were amazing. They could understand everything people said, and they actually helped out. It's not like Siri, who sometimes just gives you random stuff you didn't ask for. But even though our virtual assistants aren't perfect, they're getting better. Someday, they might actually do what we tell them to do. So let's talk about Bluetooth earbuds. Star Trek kind of predicted those too. Back then, people had phones with cords, and it was annoying. But Star Trek imagined a future where you didn't need cords at all. Their earbuds were a bit weird looking though. They stuck out from the ear instead of wrapping around it, but hey, it was a TV show. They had to make it look cool. So yeah, Star Trek had some good ideas about the future. Voice recognition, touchscreens, Bluetooth earbuds, all the stuff we use today. And even though our technology isn't perfect yet, maybe someday we'll have computers like they did on Star Trek. Ones that actually understand us and help us out instead of just giving us the wrong answers or playing the wrong song when we ask. But until then, we'll just have to keep yelling at Siri and hoping for the best. Sometimes we talk a lot about things being impossible or not happening in our lifetime, but it's nice to remember that some things from science fiction become real. Who knows, maybe someday we'll have gadgets even cooler than what they dreamed of. Do share your opinions in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more similar content.